All right, let's dive right into this explainer and look at the single biggest question facing America today. How on earth do we fix our massive, spiraling national debt? We're going to break down exactly what's happening to the federal budget, where the cash is really going, and look at the actual, albeit pretty painful, solutions to fix it.
The US government is acting remarkably like a guy going through a classic midlife crisis. But instead of a nasty divorce, overpriced cocktail lounges, and a brand new Corvette, Uncle Sam is blowing trillions on healthcare programs, tanks, and monthly checks for 70 million retirees. And unlike a normal midlife crisis that you might fix with a gym membership, this is one we have to live through year after year. Because of this unchecked spending, we are currently running a nearly $2 trillion annual deficit. That means we are spending almost $2 trillion more than we actually bring in every single year. We're essentially acting like a college freshman with a shiny new credit card and absolutely zero concept of consequences. And what happens when we can't pay? Well, we just borrow the difference, which is exactly why the national debt has exploded to over $38 trillion. It's a number so large it almost feels made up.
Section 1. The anatomy of a deficit. Where does all that cash go?
To understand how the world's strongest economy has operated like a completely unprofitable business since 2001, we first need to break down exactly where all this money is flowing. Federal spending fundamentally comes in three buckets. First up is mandatory spending. These are programs locked in by law like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Think of this as the financial equivalent of your monthly rent. You absolutely have to pay it unless you want some very serious immediate repercussions. Next, we have discretionary spending. This is the yearly spending chosen by Congress, covering things like national defense, education, and foreign aid. This is the highly visible segment of the budget that politicians actually love to fight about on television every single year. And finally, bucket number 3, net interest. This is the interest we owe on our existing debt, minus any interest income the government receives. Now, this one is not optional, and it's certainly not something Congress votes on. It is simply the brutal, unavoidable bill we owe for all the previous bills we decided not to pay. So here is the crucial takeaway. When you add all that up, just 5 giant line items make up nearly 70% of the entire federal budget: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, national defense, and net interest. That means literally everything else the government does is just pocket change relative to those 5 massive categories. Moving to Section 2, the foreign aid myth. Is it really the main issue? Because those 5 giants consume nearly 3/4 of the budget, we need to immediately address and debunk a popular myth you constantly hear when folks talk about fixing the deficit. You'll always hear people screaming that we just need to cut foreign aid. Well, let's actually look at the numbers. In 2024, the U.S. spent $78 billion on foreign aid. Now, standing alone, sure, that sounds like a massive amount of cash, but in reality, that is only about 1% of the entire federal budget. To put that into perspective, if we were to cut all foreign aid to absolutely zero, what would that actually buy us? Exactly 19 days of Social Security payments. 19 days! And then we are right back to borrowing. It is barely even a rounding error in the grand scheme of this deficit. Trimming the edges around a $2 trillion deficit just doesn't move the needle. Trying to fix the deficit by cutting these tiny 1% line items is like trying to lose weight by switching to Diet Coke while still eating every single meal at McDonald's. We have to address the root causes, which mathematically leaves us with only 2 real options to balance the budget. Which brings us to Section 3. Defense cuts are unlikely. Our 13% budget issue. Option 1 is cutting national defense, which currently eats up about 13% of the federal budget at roughly $850 billion annually. We vastly outspend the next 10 countries combined, and yes, that includes China, Russia, and Germany. However, national defense acts as a sort of emotional support blanket for the entire country. And with global tensions rising right now, it is a remarkably sticky political issue. No elected official wants to be the fall guy who guts defense spending, so realistically, drastic cuts here are highly unlikely to happen. All right, Section 4, the mandatory giants, the 44% of the budget. That leaves us with Option 2, attacking the untouchable Mount Everest of our budget challenges. We are talking about mandatory spending, specifically Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which together cost a staggering $3 trillion annually. And all of this builds to an absolute gut punch. If we just close our eyes and do nothing, the trust funds keeping these programs alive are running dry. The Medicare Hospital Insurance Trust Fund is estimated to be insolvent by 2033, which triggers automatic benefit cuts of around 11%. Social Security follows right behind, projected to be insolvent by 2034, triggering an automatic 20% cut for the millions of seniors who literally rely on it to survive. Doing nothing is a countdown to disaster.
But there is a path forward here. We can fix Social Security. First, we could eliminate the payroll tax cap. Right now, you only pay Social Security tax on the first $170,000 of income. Untaxed earnings above that cap have grown substantially over the years, so eliminating it would actually close about 73% of the funding shortfall. Second, we need to adjust benefits for high-income retirees. I mean, it fundamentally doesn't make sense to pay Social Security to billionaires like Warren Buffett or people earning millions in dividends who simply don't need that safety net. To save Medicare, which costs over $850 billion annually, we have a couple levers to pull. We could raise the standard Medicare payroll tax by just 1 point, which would actually raise over $1 trillion over the next 10 years. We also desperately need to stop overpaying private Medicare Advantage plans. The data estimates these plans are overpaid by 22 to 39% on average, wasting somewhere between $83 to $127 billion every single year. It's wild. Finally, let's take a look at Medicaid. While it doesn't have a trust fund that can go insolvent, it still costs the government more than $600 billion annually. We could save tens of billions of dollars per year simply by cracking down on administrative errors and fraud. Right now, over 5% of all Medicaid spending goes to improper payments, just due to data errors and eligibility mistakes. Fixing that is just basic fiscal hygiene. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the costs of doing nothing and our spiraling debt burden. Now, I've outlined the painful, politically unpopular fixes, but what happens if America just says screw it and continues to put this off? Well, it creates a really dark domino effect. If we keep borrowing trillions with absolutely no plan, investors will realize the situation just isn't sustainable. So to compensate for that risk, they will demand higher returns. That sends the interest rates at which the U.S. borrows soaring. And when that happens, everything in your life gets more expensive. Your mortgage, your car loan, credit card rates, business loans, they all go up, essentially choking the economy in slow motion. The ultimate reality check here is that we still have a shrinking window to fix this mess. But there is no perfect, painless solution. There are only trade-offs and sacrifices. If we want to avoid an economic chokehold and protect our most vulnerable citizens, we have to choose a path. So, looking at all the data we've just covered in this explainer, which of these ugly, unpopular choices do you think we should make? Because if there's one thing that is mathematically certain right now, doing nothing is absolutely not an option.